It doesn't apply. Parents, please pick up your children as soon as Sunday school is over. The teachers thank you. Okay. So this is a cyclical thing that comes up every once in a while. We remember. Let's see, who's in here? This is one of these little moments. Oh, it's probably on YouTube, isn't it? Oh, well. My sister had a girl in one of her classes years ago that would always stick around late. And Karen asked her at one point, I mean, you can go, right? I mean, you can go. She was old enough, she could go. And she said, my mom gets really freaked out after she realizes that she has no idea where I am. I think she's receiving the rewards of how she behaved when she was a kid now. Or she will be. Hers are getting old enough. Okay. Ben's going to teach about persecution. He's going to talk about persecution. I went into the young people that I'm interviewing about persecution, and they looked at me really stupid. And then they sat there for a second, because this wasn't like a normal, Bible story thing. So then they said, Stephen got stoned. Now, there aren't a lot of Flannelgraph things for Stephen getting stoned. So we're going to say Stephen, and we're going to say stones. Okay? So we know that occasionally people got chained up. Paul and Silas got chained up. Other people got chained up. They do actually have a whip. Cool. That I'm sure was supposed to be used by a soldier. They got one really kind of, wow. They give a little kid nightmares. That one's bad. It's almost as bad as this. I found that. I'm kind of thinking that might be John the Baptist. I'm not sure. That was odd. What's that? Goliath? I don't know. Okay, I'm not going to go there. Okay, so we know that things did happen biblically. I want to talk real briefly, and this is just out of me because the kids really weren't a lot of help on this one. So there were these two guys, and these are real people. Pliny the Younger and Trajan. These guys were like major league bureaucrats, and I couldn't have both of them be like Old Testament looky, because this reminds me of state of Illinois bureaucrat, and that's really what these people were like, state of Illinois bureaucrats. So Trajan writes a letter, and they converse back and forth through some documents that we have, early church stuff. Trajan says, hey, we've got these people in my area. They're going by this name Christian. And I kind of, this is probably, I'm not going to get my numbers right. I'm thinking probably 200, 300 AD, something like that. Jeff shakes his head, yes, that's a pretty good sign. So Trajan says to Pliny the Younger, I've got these people, I kind of don't know what to do with them. But here's what I've been doing him. He's just looking for some cover his behind stuff from his boss. That's all he's looking for. And he says, I'm persecuting them a little bit. I'm doing a little torture. They won't give up this God thing that they're focused on, and they won't say, oh, your gods are okay. They got this one, and they pick it out, and then that's all they'll do. And if they keep it up, I just kill them because they're just stubborn. And Pliny the Younger goes, sounds good. That's good. I agree with that. And he says, no, you got to be careful. Make sure there's more than 2 or 3 witnesses. Don't just have people coming. So the Christian church, these people this was not like us. I'm going to stop there with the Flannelgraph and let Ben roll.
There you go. Okay. We on? All right.
All right. Well, I got some big little shoes to fill, and don't expect much. So persecution, I thought, well, that's one of the things. I was talking to Doug when we first introduced this idea that what you don't talk about in Sunday school class for little kids, and seemingly knowing why, because it's not a pretty picture. What we find in Scripture from beginning to end, essentially from the fall until it's all renewed again, is persecution. It's everywhere. And God is most definitely uses as a tool, as a refinement for his people. And we can see the very first story in Cain and Abel. One of the things we want to think about here with the persecution, though, that I want to kind of establish is that you can be on either side of this fence and think that you're being persecuted. So Cain here could possibly think he was being persecuted by Abel because Abel was showing him up before God, and so now he's not good enough. So Cain feels bad, resents towards Abel, kills Abel, but clearly we all know on our end that Abel was the guy that was actually persecuted here and murdered, and then we get this all the way up to the very end until Christ even returns, and later on, like I'll see if I can find that verse later, Revelation 11 something. So I kind of just want to lay that groundwork because there's persecution going back and forth between the righteous against the righteous. You got righteous against the wicked and the wicked against the righteous. So it's flopping all over the place. And for God's people, the persecution is really one of his best tools that he uses to refine his people, create dependency on him, and all these kind of different things. Even when we go back to Abraham, he is told he's going to have a great nation, but first, hey, your kids, your future offspring, are going to be essentially persecuted in foreign lands for 400 years. That doesn't really sound like a good time coming ahead. So we have to think of those things as the persecutions are coming along as actually a blessing to bring about God's glory in his people. We've kind of messed up a little bit here in the U.S. as far as our mentality goes because we kind of think we need to create the culture to develop it up to be a Christian nation or dominionism or all these different ideas. But in reality, and I'll touch on here this maybe a little bit later, but the studies have shown, they did a 10-year study from 2010 to 2020, global study of 162 nations that they've studied persecution and how churches grow or don't grow under different circumstances, but they found out the ones that have the most government favor are actually the worst for the church. People get complacent. The Orthodox Church, Eastern Orthodox Church over in Europe, mostly they still have, the church is actually still a part of the government system. And in those places, people really don't even go to church anymore. Regardless, it was generic Christian. So Mormons are probably the only ones that would be here in the States. But those other ones it's the same kind of setup. So when they're able to be lazy, people are lazy. And we can even see that all the way back in Israel time. But I want to hit a few verses here, and then I'll probably just ramble on later on. We'll see how it goes. So we got even in Matthew 5:44, but I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. I mean, that's a little bit different. One of the things I guess I want to touch on here before I get going too far is that remain innocent as a dove, wise as a serpent. To be innocent as a dove, you can't be attacking people. Doves are kind of stupid little things that kind of fly over here, and you almost got to kick them out of your way. I mean, you can kind of feel bad by kicking it out of the way. They're so innocent that you don't really want to do anything. So all the good examples of persecution that we have and God uses it to his glory is when they're actually innocent. It's not when they're coming after people. Same with Abel's would be, again, the very first one. Got examples of Joseph and Daniel and David, and some of the, David's not quite so innocent, I wouldn't say, in my book, but, he's a little aggressive. But God used that as well. And then Romans 12:14, blessed are those who persecute you, bless and do not curse. So, that's kind of completely 180 from what we naturally want to do. We want to actually, if they're persecuting us, we want to defend ourselves. We want to jump up and curse them down and tell them, hey, what I've got is right. You have no power to try to tell me that I'm wrong. So you're going to curse them down. The other thing on the other side of this persecution is you can actually persecute the evil, and the evil will expand. We can kind of see that with the homosexuality thing, I think, in the States now. It's people in general have compassion for others, and as they see them being squashed, other people come in and they want to have compassion and wrap their arms around them, even if they're worldly people. And then they do that, and it kind of infects them with the yeast, I guess to say, and it spreads throughout all of the culture. So you've got to be careful on the other end too. So again, innocent as a dove, so you're not condemning the whole world. You're trying to draw them in. So there should be a difference on the inside and outside of the church and the world. And blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. That's the big one, Matthew 5:11. That's the big one because of Christ, right? So Christ was innocent. He had nothing that anybody could hold against him. And so he had complete innocence. So if you're being convicted and you're sitting there cussing somebody down and everybody else is watching, they're not really going to think you're too innocent. You've got to really present yourself and be innocent, and you're not attacking and going after others to otherwise you're not doing it for Christ's sake. Even the first fruits we have in Revelation are the ones that are actually martyred for Christ's sake, not the ones out trying to go and attack others and different things and die for other reasons, but it's the ones that are actually coming through innocent in their Christ-like act that are actually the first fruits there. For all of you who have heard your former manner of life and Judaism, but now and how I used to persecute the church of God beyond measure and try to destroy it. That's Galatians 1:13. That was Paul there talking about what his former time was. Let me grab an old one here. The one I mentioned earlier about Abraham is as that God said to Abram, know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, where they will be enslaved and oppressed for 400 years. And then Solomon's got Ecclesiastes 5:8. If you see oppression of the poor and denial of justice and righteousness and the providence, do not be shocked at the sight. For one official watches over another official, and there are other officials over them. I think that's one of the things here with the culture in the U.S. right now, especially all the political upheaval, that we're concerned about these authorities not being held into account. And we can clearly see they're breaking the laws in all kinds of places, and but it's not our job to go after them, I don't think, and condemn them and curse them, for those authorities have been established by God above us. And God watches over, as we say here, it's a hierarchical system. It's not our domain to take these over. Our kingdom is not here. It's not of this earth. It's in heaven. So with the Father, with the Son, and we're just here to be a light. And if our bodies are persecuted, if we're to be knocked down, I with my dad's sermon a little bit this morning with the people that are seeking money, you're trying to keep gaining at the top. But so we don't need to worry about that. God will give it to us as He sees fit. Am I rambling? Anybody got questions? Let's throw that out there. Break up. Nothing? Any ideas? Nothing? Man, I'm awesome. Okay, so let's go into Joseph's story a little bit. I thought that one was kind of good one. Well, let's just go up. So we got Abraham. We've also got Job. Job was clearly persecuted. Job had nothing that God was really holding him against. Satan thought he had something he could get Job over on. So clearly Satan is straight up going after Job there, tries to persecute him with all kinds of physical pain, with family death, possessions, everything wiped out. And at the end of that fire and trial, it was to God's glory and to Job's growth. So again, persecuted there. But the story of Joseph I just thought was pretty interesting, because Joseph, definitely the favored son. The other brothers were jealous and didn't like the way he was being favored, and so they decided to persecute him, and he is sent off, as we know, into slavery, and he ends up getting back to. Eventually, his brothers come and bow down to him. All of his dreams come true. Potiphar's wife, even there, is trying to persecute him because she's desiring him strongly and going after him for a while. And he ends up not falling for that trap. And so she feels persecuted, I think. And so she goes and attacks him and tries to blame him. And then even while Joseph's in jail, he ends up being basically the head of over all the other prisoners, which is kind of amazing at the same time. So, and same time, I think Joseph here knows somewhat of what Abraham's promise was as far as being in these lands, foreign lands, and persecuted. I don't think he gets it quite yet at that point, but I think he gets it a little bit later, especially when his brothers start showing up and everyone moves in to the land. And I think when Jacob is going to be, when Joseph finally calls his whole family to move into Egypt, I think Jacob's hesitancy isn't so much going there as he's going into a foreign land, and it's going to start this 400-year persecution of the people. That's my take anyway, because I'm pretty sure they would have remembered some of this stuff, and I'm sure it got passed down from Abraham to his descendants. And and then Joseph even goes on until finally they get into Gen 20 or Gen 50, where Joseph says to his brothers, they come to him, even after, I thought this was kind of interesting, the brothers, after the father dies, they all come to Joseph, and this has been 17 years, I believe. The brothers come back to Joseph, and they're still like begging for him, well, crap, our dad's dead now. You're going to come after us, because he was our protector. And but Joseph, and I thought it was amazing, these guys are still living under essentially their own persecution, thinking that Joseph is still going to be out for them or kind of get revenge on them. And Joseph starts crying, and I think it's because he's remorseful that he didn't make it clear enough to these guys that, hey, I forgive you. And so anyway, but he says, what you intended for evil, God intended for good. And he's looking back on, that had to be a hard time. Your brother sold you into slavery. You're sitting in jail for a while for the Potiphar's wife, but yet everything that the Lord worked through him and brought them into this land and gave them the best of everything when they showed up into the Egypt territory. And they were all protected. And it was it was actually been probably 10 decades after the famine was over, but actually a little bit more than that. So they were already kind of prospering. And then, of course, you jump forward 400 years, and you got Moses and his mom. The whole Israelite family was supposed to kill their offspring, or one of them. And so Moses' mother's actually attempting to kill her child. And in all practical purposes, pretty sure there's alligators in the Nile River. So if you put a child in a basket and just float him on down the river, you would think that's pretty well suicide for that child, or murdering the child. And, and so she was even, to me, in my mind, it doesn't get it there in the scripture, but I think she's being obedient to the authorities at this point. I think she's really doing what she was told to do, because we even go back where the midwives were saying, well, they're having babies so fast we can't even catch them, and which probably a little bit of a small tale there, but maybe they were having so many kids, the quicker the deliveries get, maybe they were producing like rabbits over there, I don't know, but it sure sounds like it too. But so as he's floating down the river, right? So I guess essentially the rebellious Pharaoh's kids picked Joseph up and raised him in the house. So that was under a persecution again. So God grabs him, and then Moses has got his thing, and he's off. The people are being persecuted and crying out to God. I think this is one of the flips here too. The people there are crying out to God because they're actually being persecuted in Egypt. And God hears their cries. Obviously, it's fulfilling scripture too, and or prophecy. And as that time is coming, Moses is coming back, and they persecute the Egyptians even more. The Egyptians persecute the Israelites even more because Moses is coming in and saying, "Let them go," and Pharaoh's like, "Yeah, whatever. You guys can just work harder now." And so that even gets more burdensome. And lost thought. So as it goes along there, Moses is, they're crying out to God. God finally lets them all go. And actually, as they're leaving, all the Egyptians say, "Here, take our gold, silver, everything." Basically, they plunder Egypt as they run out and leave. And then as soon as they get out, we already know they start squalling and complaining about the circumstances that they're stuck under. And so they're under that persecution there, but God essentially persecutes his own people in a sense with the wilderness to get them to get their dependency. And he starts thinning the herd out pretty quick, and then it persecutes, essentially runs them through the wilderness for 40 years to run that out of the system. But we see even when they show up, the giants give them a little bit of a scare, and they're not quite so dependent again. And once they start seeing victories, they get a little boost of confidence and start moving forward. But and then you've constantly got the repeated history that Israel does with getting persecuted, not persecuted, but when they're not being persecuted, they quickly fall off. It's just the cycle of through the whole scriptures. But when they don't, let's see where we're at. Short period of time they do, but then they end up falling off. They're warned consistently, hey, bad times are coming. The northern tribes of Israel end up not listening, but Judah kind of pays attention. When they get destroyed, they hang on for a few hundred years longer. Then we'll move into Daniel's story. Daniel in the lion's den is a good one there, and Daniel was doing everything. All the people he was one of 100+ advisors. He was the top of the game. Everybody was kind of jealous of him. He was the only one serving the true God, so he had quite an advantage, and God was using him at the same time. So Daniel was innocent before the king, innocent before God, and essentially the bad guys try to catch him up and get the king to write off an order to essentially eliminate Daniel, because he's the competition. We're right back to the Cain and Abel story. So that didn't work out too well for him. But the king is really remorseful, and this would be awesome, wouldn't it, if right now in our world and culture that what the king says, what's on the rules, what's on the law books, they actually hold to it. because this king does not want to kill Daniel at all. And he realized he's been tricked, and he tries to change it. Finally, he's got to honor his word. And he throws Daniel in the lion's den and says, hope your God's with you. And the king stays up all night. And he is fasting, and he is praying and hoping that Daniel survives. And first thing he does in the morning is run out, see if Daniel's still alive. Daniel's still alive. And the first thing Daniel says to the king that threw him in the pit, that could have possibly changed his mind, he said, "O king, live forever." And clearly Daniel was being persecuted here, and not so much by the king, but the king's order still threw him in there. But Daniel was found innocent through this thing. So he was this dove being cast into this pit, and he's innocent before God. He was innocent before the king. And what the next thing happens essentially is, I think first thing the king does is he declares this God is the God. This is the one and true God. So through the persecution of Daniel, he's allowed to show off the glory of God through Daniel because of the persecution. Had they not tried to trick him and pitch him and kill him, it would not have been so evident, especially to the king, who then declares, this is the God above all gods. This is the dominion. It's his dominion that lives forever, and all those kind of things there that he goes on. And then what we don't see next, though, he throws all the ones that tried to trap Daniel into the lion's den, and their bones are all broken and destroyed before they even hit the bottom. But what we don't see is Daniel cheering here, which I thought was kind of an interesting take, because a lot of times you want to cheer for your enemies that are destroyed, but we're actually kind of told not to do that, to not rejoice because of they got destroyed. Or we've got to kind of get back to the flesh and blood thing of all this. It's not against the flesh and blood. It's against the spiritual realms that we're really dealing with, and all of that. And then of course we've got Jesus as the awesome example of persecution from the time he was born. King's going after him, trying to kill him. He's hiding out there, and then by the time he gets to his ministry walk, he is being persecuted by anybody and everybody to try to get him on stuff. And it's mostly the religious leaders. And one of the things with Jesus stayed innocent on is he wasn't, and he came for we've got to remember, he came for the weak and the lost, the ones that don't have strength. The religious leaders at the time was the biggies who Jesus went after, and because they were puffed up and thinking they were actually living the life accordingly. So I guess if Jesus persecuted anybody, it would have been the religious leaders for sure. But he left the weak and the lost alone, which I think even in our society we've got to remember today that we don't go after these people that are actually low and at the bottom, the ones that are actually lost, which our culture seems to want to condemn and ridicule all the different options that are out there. So I want to go to a little study. It was done, I don't remember who did this study, but it was based off of that 10-year study of 162 countries of how Christianity rolls, and that when Christianity is the only thing around, it seems to fade off. Or the church itself fades off, it gets complacent. So it actually is good that there's actually competition in the environment, because you've kind of it's got to prove itself. It's got to stand out different than the world, because if there's no contrast, then you can't compare anything. So then people just was like, well, they kind of do their own thing. So it's got to stand on its own feet. It's got to be able to come forward with it. It doesn't have to go along with it. I think that's the other failure of what a lot of the, I guess, woke churches, which would be Christianity Today, which I'm reading here, they kind of tend to go more towards a woke church leaning and try to conform the world to Christ and through their social works, which isn't anywhere in the scriptures that I can find. But so then the paradox of privilege is one of the things they name off. So again, if you got the privilege, if you've got the official support of the country, of the nation, it's actually detrimental. So to call the United States a Christian nation is not to our benefit in the long run. Nor are we, but it's a good thought. And really, most of what I was studying here, the religious thing for the church, or the Christian perspective in the United States really didn't start happening until about the 1950s. And that's when we decided we're kind of go political. And that's kind of, I think that's been more of a turnoff to people in the culture, because there's a lot of obviously anger going on in politics. There's a lot of resentment. There's a lot of different ideas. And it really, in my perspective, not my perspective, there was already a perfect law written, and they had that, and that didn't work out. That didn't make the nation righteous. That didn't make them what they needed to be, because that's just not the way it works. And so we can't possibly create a political correct environment for people today to be able to live their life accordingly. The world is supposed to look different than the church. It can't blend. It doesn't work. And trying to make it work just completely, it undermines itself, because God does use persecution again. And Jesus says, if you follow after me, you're going to be persecuted. I mean, that's pretty well just written in stone here, I would think. I think the common trick, though, is we kind of think, well, I'm going to blast somebody with my opinion and be harsh, or bold. I'll be bold, I guess. And if any of you were unfortunate enough to be Facebook friends with me a few years ago, you might have saw some of that. This is why I deleted my Facebook. So I'm confessing there. Sorry. Don't follow my example. Anyway, to go after the world on some of this stuff. So you got, the persecution. So it's not persecution. So if you're going to be innocent as a dove and wise as a serpent, you can't be the serpent biting and spitting at people. That's not what a dove does. Again, it's, and so we've got to be careful on that end, because that's actually a turn off to the world around, because you're trying to reach out and grab these people, and you might need to kick the tires a little bit every once in a while, or maybe be a little prickly. I like saying the salty gospel message, because it's going to sting a little bit, but if you got a big open wound, you're probably not going to pack a whole thing of salt in that sucker right immediately, especially not without their permission, So I think that's one of the things I just try to keep that in my head, because if the salt's no longer salty, it's useless. So it's got to have a sting to it, to the world. It's got to reach out to it. But if you're being overly over the top aggressive and for no reason other than condemn the world, essentially, you're being a serpent. You're not being a dove at that point. And so you're really not being persecuted for Christ's sake. You're being persecuted because you're being a jerk, which is completely a different scenario there. And that's, if you get your head caught off, well, you're not really going to be in that first fruit thing. So And John 15 was a good one. I'll see if I can find it here real quick, because I think I switched out of it. John 15, abiding in me. So again, we're shown here. Let's see if I can find this dude. I could read the whole thing and just be done. I mean, that's good enough in John 15 to me. But he's talking to initially here in the front, being, I am the true vine, and the Father is the gardener. He takes away every branch that does not bear fruit in me. He prunes every branch that bears fruit, so it'll be more fruit. So this pruning is persecution. This pruning is trials. This is difficulties in life. Is this pruning? We're cutting something off, right? So a vine, I don't know how much you guys know about this stuff, but essentially, let's just use this. So this is the trunk of the grapevine, right? So then it grows branches out, and these would go usually on a trained vine. You'd have the main trunk, you've got vines going this way, and you got another one going that way, and they usually go up, and you've got another one, and another one. And off of here, these little spurs come up, little branches, and every season you've got to go along and trim these extra spurs out, and they'll grow multiple, so they'll grow 5 or 10, and it all grows on the last year's vine. But a lot of times there's little nodules, and you train this vine up. So on those nodules, every year, multiples will grow up, but most of those, you want to just take the best one, and you cut off all the excess vines that are on there, and the one that grows, that's the most fruitful one that you want to try to pick. And so Christ is that trunk. Essentially, that's what this main part is. The branches are the offshoots, and then you've got the essentially smaller branches off the top of that, which would be more like twigs. But that's what produces the fruit. So that persecution, along with several other things God uses in his arsenal to train us up, is part of that. So we shouldn't try to avoid persecution or to retreat from that, essentially to actually realize that is actually for our benefit and ultimately really God's glory, which is what we're supposed to be doing. And I think it's verse 18 there. So if the world hates you, be aware that it hated me first. Again, you can be a jerk. You can have all kinds of things for people to hate you over, which I kind of sometimes like sparring with people a little bit, maybe for them to fight with me somewhat. But it kind of helps me as well to defend myself. I try not to be too hateful, or more or less just try to debate. And I grow mostly with debate because it's a back and forth. It's a back and forth. I got to defend my stance. You got to defend yours. It's the iron sharpening iron thing. But at the same time, you can be nasty. So if it hated, this is following Christ. So if it hates you for following Christ, that's why we know we're in line. When you can pray for your enemies, when this guy's cursed you, and you can pray blessings on them, if you can walk away and say, I hope the best for that guy. I hope the Lord opens his eyes, or I hope the Lord uses it for me, or whatever. But if you walk away and you're angry with this individual, which I'm sure it never happens, but if there's a church conflict or conflict between individuals, that you can go home and you can pray for that person. You can pray blessings on that person. If you're praying, I hope they fall over and die, that's a different prayer. That's probably not in line with where you want to be. So it even goes on. I mean, that's John 15 is a good one all the way through. You guys probably read that. I think I'm out of time, which is fantastic because I made it. And so I don't know. Hopefully I didn't ramble on too much to say too many ums, but thank you guys. Let's close in a word of prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for an opportunity for me, and we'll see where use your word and your insight and the way you've actually designed persecution to work properly to your glory, and to actually thin the herd where it needs to be and grow it. And even when you smash it, Lord, when the world tries to smash the gospel message, it actually expands even more, and it just spreads all the more because your glory is being shown, and the innocence that captures the eye of the world is known and is appealing. And Lord, I pray that your mercy and grace is on us as we go about our day. In Jesus' name, amen.